Welcome back to Security Management for Critical Infrastructure Part 2. As many of you are aware, for the last few years we've been blogging and writing articles about cybersecurity ecosystem for industrial controls and critical infrastructure. Quietly in the background, we've been working and pulling together a lot of organizations that are also supporting this ecosystem. I would like to reach out and have any of you who are working for an oil and gas company or possibly a utility company that would be interested in entertaining a pilot that is an industrial controls security and information event monitoring system to reach out to me, and we'd like to partner with somebody who is interested in entertaining a pilot for this type of platform. Thanks again, and hope you enjoy part 2 of Security Management for Critical Infrastructure.
Business needs for network management, the largest is managing data across the entire organization or between organizations. You look at business systems, the operation of them, transaction integrity of the actual operations and the interconnections. So anytime something happens between systems, between organizations, verifying the integrity that that operation was actually done correctly and end-to-end seen through. The data integrity, that the data transferred between system to system, organization to organization is accurate, and what was received was actually the same thing that was sent. And then how regulation affects businesses. Self-governance, the internal tracking of a company that keeps track of how they themselves actually keep up and do the steps required for meeting regulation. This governance needs to include a way to determine what requires and what is included to be covered in certain regulated areas. So what processes and workflows are required to meet compliance, to be able to be in accordance with what the regulation tells you to do, what internal processes need to be done by the company. And then scheduling the execution of that on a recurring basis as required by that regulation to meet compliance. And in reporting of compliance, who that company has to report to say we've taken these steps on these particular items, and that is what meets compliance. And this could either be a publicly released report or an external audit that comes in and then they make a report to regulation. Here are some of the regulatory bodies that are more prevalent in different industries. We'll talk more about these, or we have talked more about these in previous training on career guidance series. And then third parties, interaction with third parties is the next need for business network management. Controlling the contracts and who we work with and setting up the trust of those parties. Information handoffs, so the interface between the two organizations, how we set up the actual guaranteed of the handoff, that we do a handshake that says, you have received information, I have received information, here's how we're going to send it, and that procedure and then that actual implementation of it. And then the transaction integrity, the verifying that that procedure and that transaction was in fact done correctly according to procedure and that the information was received on both sides. And then cascading accountability. So a way to say, as I transfer these transactions between business parties, that each party has record of accountability, that one party has a record that they handed off the information to the next, and here's proof of it from the next party, and then the party that they're handing information to has proof that they received it, and here's the sign off from the previous party that we now have control of this. This requires trust and secrets management, so the trust of the entities, and then the secrets of how we interface and how we do these transactions, and then how we verify integrity. And there's a secret management and secrets that have to be handled at each step in the way, and how we transfer those in order to allow this systems to set up accountability between business organizations from one to the next to the next. Connecting business and technology needs mostly fall into operational support for that technology. Asynchronous operations that we talked about in previous courses on how humans interact with computers, and their actions are all undeterminate length. And then synchronous operations, times when computers connect between computers, and especially for industrial control systems, as we're talking with critical infrastructure, that operation of the real-time networks. And then protocols, defining protocols for this interconnectivity. Synchronization of these real-time networks and maintaining that they all can communicate and act as one system. An end-to-end continuity of operations, the connecting of all four trust accountability chains, the maintaining and monitoring of the current trust condition. What is the current network trust condition, and how do we keep track of it and then associate that with the data received from information from nodes at those times of different trust. This requires the trust and secrets management as well. Trust of that network and secrets management to synchronize how we communicate in those communication secrets, which are the DNA of those nodes that are across the distributed networks. Business need for logistical support in the product trust accountability chain. We have security and logistics support. How do we handle security as we work through the product identification, the products being able to self-identify and keeping track of all those mass amount of products in the manufacturing environment. So the provenance and product origin and the handling of these systems, the complementary products and how they all work together even though they might be made by a different manufacturer, the end user network and resource authorization, and application restrictions, application certificates, that they're authorized to operate on the systems and we know that they're not doing malicious activity. And warranty and service support for the end user. And how do we maintain these products and the support logistics from many different companies and ecosystems. So cascading trust and accountability is important in this ecosystem, and we use cascading as turning over accountability from one organization, one entity to another. From the product management, the people who manage the product as it goes through this flow, and then the network organization. So once they're together and they're on a network, how do they all communicate and work together effectively in keeping that trust of the product management and the supply chain up to the network and through its organization. And then the cross certification. Every time we have two organizations that need to interface with each other and either transfer or verify their networks, the operation of the networks, that to be able to communicate between the two and cross certification using certificates or other security features to understand how trust is maintained between different organizations and how the handoffs are done. This cascading of trust and accountability between organizations, both in the supply and in the network operations. These all fall in the secrets management area, where the organization and the logistic control of all the different secrets distributed across all these different systems and then distributed across all the different networks, and then be able to interface between the different companies and between the different networks for cross-certification. For enforcing security controls on the entire ecosystem, we identify the touch points between industries and identify the network collection types for each one of those touch points, and look at the GOROG security management model for which security management area needs to be addressed for that particular type of network and that collection type. And put controls that are specific to that network collection type and that security management area and that industry in place for each one of these areas in the ecosystem. Activities at touch points should maintain each of the 4 trust accountability chains, accountability of transactions for each party that interface, ability to recover that transaction should the higher level of the chain be compromised. You can go back and have the lower level redo that transaction to reset the security posture for that particular system. Now, a secrets management industry to support these operations will have to really develop, as this is something that at the current time that I'm recording this is not very prevalent in the industry, and some companies have attempted to implement their own, but it's not really interfacing between the different organizations that would require this implementation. The secrets management would need to interface and have interorganizational controls or cascading trust between different organizations as the provenance chain moves systems from one to the next. For cross-certification between those supplying and provenance organizations, but also between operational networks, cross-certification between networks in the industry. And that cross-certification is important to support the fact that these networks will be dynamic, and these logistics of different systems will move from one network to another. And a big example of this is electric vehicles, which will plug in many different networks that are under the jurisdiction of many different utility companies or end-use network system providers. So if we look at the industry and the ecosystem surrounding critical infrastructure, you see this chart I've put together. Starts at the bottom, we see education, research, and design type activities. Then the next section, the next row up, is defined by the device drivers, the integrated circuit manufacturers, the operating system and firmware development, and the control of those root secrets that start the trust of these products at this level. And then interconnecting that level to the next, you see kind of configuration management and secure system development lifecycle. But at the next level, we have the application development, the subcomponent PCB manufacturing for the hardware side, and then the programming of those devices by the manufacturer using programming transports we talked about before. And that level, also connected by configuration management and application test and environment lifecycle on the right, moves up to the next level where it's the end system manufacturing base application integration and application licensing. And this is the level where the vendor secrets and the vendor certificates, vendor management of keys are relevant and start to come into play. You move up to the next level and we see logistic support and end device network provenance. So we're starting to bring products in from all this different manufacturers into the end device. And that's where device onboard integrity starts to be all put together and come together. As well, you see the marketing and supply chain off to the left, more people-oriented interfaces. The next level up starts with the networking of critical infrastructure devices, bringing that system integration into the network all together, and implementing things of network operations and boundary management. And then kind of at the next level up, we start looking at the actual collection of data and the management of that network and the trust of it and synchronization. And then kind of application trust and lifecycle you see up at that level again, which goes into the next level up, the business systems. And at the business system level, you see the interface between cross-industry support and the business systems and third-party support, as well as kind of data management of how that data operation is done and managed in those third parties. And then we keep moving up to the next level. We see the kind of the business organization, the governance and risk compliance, and the kind of identity and access management and the corporation human resources and how that interfaces. And at that corporate level, you see the corporate secrets management that also integrates to the two levels below, where it integrates to the business operations and to the network synchronization and trust management portions. We talked about that in security management gateways. And then kind of up at the top bringing this industry full circle is the government regulations and compliance and the standards industry groups and support organizations, which then link back around, you see, to the initial requirements for the base key management structure, as well as feedback into the education, research, and design environment you have down at the bottom of the drawing. Now, what we're looking at here is looking across this industry ecosystem and defining the collection types. On this drawing, you see the colors define those collection types which are relevant for each of these interfaces. And you see not all collection types are relevant as far as security concerns for each one of these interfaces. So it starts to give us the ability to break this down. And then we would look at mapping that effort for coordination of the security management areas to the relevant collection types for that network. Now this drawing, we've eliminated everything that wasn't connected by people and by the actual social networks included in business. And on this same drawing, by removing these, anything not connected by people, we've brought down that which one of these interfaces that need to be addressed by policy. So anywhere that people are interfacing with these business functions or these different parts of the ecosystem, the policies need to be defined, and not just for one organization, but how they relate anywhere that these organizational boundaries are crossed, which I have not shown here, but could go back and put on the green where the organizational boundaries are being crossed for each one of these different blocks. So each network type interface from that MyGorog security management model needs to have policies for how the people handle and require security management functionality between any two interfaces on this whole ecosystem graph. Now looking at the network collection type on this, I've taken out everything that wasn't a network collection type. Now I further went on to say, let's have several different types of networks in here, and let's put some colors to them. And really you have the secrets management for product and provenance in red. You see that if I left that network in red. And the business operations for sensor data gathering, and I put that into a blue color and showed that as using the network icon. And then business support for information technology and kind of the human business aspects and the functional support. That I've showed in the pink color, which integrates a lot of the environment support, configuration management, and test type of operations that are very people dependent. Then we have the cross-industry or business transactions between different organizations, which I put in purple. And there's a few of these on here. There would be more if we went to include the kind of the non-network interfaces. But as far as the network interfaces, there's only a few that define inter-industry support. And those require definition of that interface between the industries so that everybody can be talking on the same page. For provenance and product support organizational collection types, I've removed the network and people collection types and left kind of the provenance support interactions. The interorganizational are the most relevant, as cascading products between these are the primary concern for security operations. So that's why I've left the organization, as well as divided the product support between the areas that would be more hardware related and the ones that are more software related. And you see that these two come together at the end system manufacturing kind of base system integration points. But for this provenance support, we have a lot of security management areas that become involved. A large one is the secrets management and how those are handled, cascaded, and organized across there to get to the end goal of onboard system integrity. And trust management, which has that onboard system integrity. But trust in this ecosystem also involves trusting the organizations and the multiple companies that are involved. Supply chain management has a lot to do with that and bringing all those together in the cascading of the trust and the trust management across these different pieces of the ecosystem, as well as managing all the various vendors and then the products that come together and how those are all integrated. And the policy has to bring all these together, especially in places where people are involved, and processes to organize what needs to happen for each transition between each of these different segments of the ecosystem. The last step of this is kind of linking the security management areas to the network collection types across the ecosystem. And we'll use this GOROG security management model I produced. We'll contrast for the entire ecosystem each collection interface that we just looked at out of the 4 collection types, and each network type off the GOROG security management model here. And then we'll define the security management area which needs addressed for that particular interface and how to do this and how to put this all together. And this gives us the security management areas that we'll need to address for each interface in the ecosystem. And you'll see we'll cover this more in the training for each security management area as we break those out in a lot more detail. People are the ultimate beneficiary of computer actions. People are the primary focus. People make decisions. People are accountable. People are trusted. If a machine does something it shouldn't, what is the next step? Finding the person that made that machine do it. Proving it to chain of operations from machine to person requires a chain of trust, requires setting up controls to track the chain of trust, and cascading and handing off accountability from one operation, from one group, one portion of the industry to another. Let's talk about a security which addresses this. We look at accountability. We want to know who is to blame. The systems of accountability for humans was set up thousands of years ago. Accountability for machines is assumed to inherit the human accountability code. However, what is needed is a method of transferring accountability of humans to a large number of machines operating on unmanned networks without humans. Since computers cannot have a moral code, accountability must be designed into the operation. Trust chains to uphold trust, proving data operations. So when we look at societies, every person contributes to the accountability of the society. A new moral code which covers every portion of the ecosystem for critical infrastructure must cover electromechanical systems, logistic networks, virtual and software systems, and business process and human actors all need to be included. Now, accountability controls for critical infrastructure networks would consist of accountability and marshaling of the data content and data aspect, trusting and organization of the network, refreshing and maintaining security posture across different entities, integrated user and business operations, and inter-organization and organizational support. All these require the implementation of a security management gateway between these two vastly different types of networks. Such a gateway implements security controls for management areas identified on that large area in the center of the GOROG security management model we talked about earlier. For the most part, this need is unique to critical infrastructure networks due to that contrast of those adjacent quadrants that we also talked about. On each side of the gateway supports a different operation or functionality, and we'll kind of go through what those functionalities are. Remember, the security management framework and security management model I put together between information technology and industrial control circuit type networks exists that special condition where that arrow in the center is pointing to. Management on each side of this is nearly polar opposite. So these different types of networks are entirely opposite. To bridge this requires a gateway which addresses this gap, and this covers the people, process, and technology portions of the business across this gateway. Security management is the focus of this gateway. Data lifecycle management, trust management, secrets management, supply chain management, vendor management, policy management, and boundary management all are across these networks where they cross and all need to be addressed. So that security management gateway kind of has two faces facing each side of this network, each of these two different types of network. From the embedded system network, it's going to organize and synchronize that high accountability, that high accountable network. It's going to act as a head end collecting data from any of the points on that network with the ability to verify the origin of that data, classify that data, and protect it when it needs confidentiality. The third thing is it maintains node trust and assesses risk associated with the communications or a particular node at any given time and labels the data with that trust risk condition. On the IT network side, it provides any information from any of those sensors down on the embedded network side to IT networks as needed, along with a timestamp, a proof of its origin for any given node on that embedded system network. Another thing it does is verifies the current and past levels of trust of that embedded network. It keeps that configuration information from the embedded nodes. On the IT side, it also verifies the past and current levels of that embedded node, of the trust on that embedded network, and the configuration information from those embedded nodes. And it validates any request for access to protected or confidential data. So it has like a library check-in, check-out functionality to provide that interface of who has it and what the data was used for. In this section, we're going to talk about how to bridge that gap between these network types and how the operations in the security management gateway all come together to support the business as a whole. From the embedded network management side, management and coordination of the embedded system networks consists of three pieces. A distributed secret, kind of like DNA data item on each end node computer with the minimum management operations, protected storage, and the keys or secrets that match the enterprise system on the back end. And then that enterprise data storage component for the storage of protected secrets, the organizational DNA, so to speak, and management functionality. This matches the operations which are done on each end node management block. It contains or creates that secret DNA for communicating with each node individually. And then we have the third piece is an active trust monitoring, the network synchronization system. And this keeps track of the network health and monitors the integrity of that network, provides the ability to establish and maintain the network in a trusted state, and synchronizes the secrets and the communications to each one of those nodes out. We will explore these in detail over the next few slides. The first piece we'll look at is that distributed secret, that DNA data item in each end node. And this stores the device root secrets. This capability for asynchronous and synchronous operations, so produces keys for communication for each type of operations. Stores asymmetric private keys and the operation for protecting them, and produces symmetric keys as needed. And it refreshes the security posture. And it would have the capability to refresh the security posture of this individual node by linking it to the network key synchronization system. An individual privacy and session capability, the ability to produce an individual key that then matches what's on security management gateway key storage. The next piece is that embedded system data and synchronization management. And you see on the right hand side we have this synchronization management system. And you can see I have two networks parented, one in blue, one in red. And basically this shows a network that is synchronized. All the keying and ability to communicate is set up and managed by this synchronization management with the ability to roll and change keys. So have a unique way to identify them, then a way to roll them and know what number of rolls they're on, including what is the network ID and maybe variations of the network ID with each level of the network. And then event timestamps and event signatures and maintain that synchronization based on the time that it was done and the time of operations so that we can know the state of this network as far as synchronization to all the other nodes. On the left-hand side, you'll see the data management system. We've shown this as being able to read and gather information as needed from whatever node it needs to communicate with on the network by setting up a path to do so. So the next part of the system, the enterprise storage of those protected secrets, interfaces with the synchronization management to map the organization DNA to individualized communications. So it matches a particular individual node to create or recreate the DNA of that particular node out in the network. You see as shown in this bottom picture that there are several different DNAs in there now produced from the organization DNA within a trusted key storage and operations section, so a protected operations and memory location, able to match the DNA of every node out there and produce a key to communicate with every node based on the current synchronization, the current state of that network from synchronization management. It creates communication keys for individual nodes and secure sessions. So now you see we've added this trust management system, which has input from the synchronization management, receives events from individual or surrounding nodes, as well as organizational, operational, or threat connect alerts input into this system. Active Trust Management then maintains a repository of the current node conditions, what all the conditions of the current nodes are. So it keeps track in a database of the repository and what all the current nodes conditions are, and it alerts users to the status or the change of any status. Then you can see on the left on the data management side, it adds metadata to the data items collected at any given time based on the current state of the network, so that now the data has a piece contained with it that tells you what the network trusts, and that thus the trust of the data is for a given read or data information. So what types of inputs will we have to Active Trust Management? Startup signatures, whether they're startup signatures valid or invalid, unexpected configuration changes to the network or to any node out there, missynchronization, so anytime the synchronization management tries to synchronize a network and one of them doesn't synchronize, it says there could be a problem here and reports that to Active Trust Management. Any kind of device communication errors, communicating with a device, it didn't do something or didn't respond as expected, that's another trigger. Unexpected shutdown, so if a device is out there shutting down and it sends out a last signal, says I'm shutting down, and that wasn't something that should have been happening, that's a trigger to Active Trust to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't trust this node, if something is going on there that's not planned. Other surrounding systems communicating with it, because we have a network and we have a highly accountable network. Information passed across a network and across each devices, if they receive anything unexpected, they're going to report or kind of tattletale on each other, and that type of input also goes to Active Trust Management. So things like intermittent communication activity, reduced performance, takes longer to do operations. And this is important because if it's a virtual machine, or if it's sending information somewhere outside the network, or it has additional malware put in there, it slows down the performance, and this could be noted in the surrounding system communications. Things like expired certificate as well, or mismatch on dynamic authentication. Two nodes might occasionally just dynamically authenticate each other, and it comes back and says, hey, I tried this with a node and it gave me some bad information. Sensor reads from each sensor. If you're getting reads in there, everything as normal, the longer a node out there operates normally as expected, the more trust you should have. And sensor data comparison to peers. So if that data is different than all the ones around it, you know that either there's something going on, or if this happens on a regular basis, that there could be some kind of trust reduction system to that particular node. Unexpected maintenance logon, something that wasn't expected, that somebody has physical access to it. Also, somebody remote access granted, the system could report back, or the network monitoring could say somebody's accessed this node remotely. External events such as industry, vulnerability alerts, critical patch alerts, threat connect alerts, or boundary management system events, things that are received from firewalls or information protection systems, or something like a firmware out of date or a mismatch, either received from the node itself or from a patch management system. And now we'll look at the secure sessions, the enterprise data storage. We've added this trusted key storage and operations piece, which receives input regarding the current state of the network from the Active Trust monitoring. It produces communication keys for a secure session with that embedded node on the network, using the Active Trust and knowledge of the network and the DNA that it produced from each device out there to be able to securely communicate with that device. This creates individual keys for use in data management for privacy requirements. It produces shared keys for use in synchronization management to support rapid communication needs of that embedded system network. and provision certificates for asymmetric key operations, public key operations. So now look at the end-to-end operation of the data from sensor reads. The session key used for end-to-end communications on the embedded system network, and the trusted key storage portion of that security management gateway sets up communication session to that embedded node across a trusted path, and then brokers that flow of data back up to the enterprise data systems. You look at the reverse of that, creating electromechanical operations triggered by an enterprise system. The trusted key storage operations now sets up the session in a trusted path, brokers the electromechanical command operation, including the time sensitivity and time sensitive operations, and enables verification of these critical operations and verification of the command across to them. Now that we've kind of fully explored what is happening on the embedded system network side, let's look at the IT system network from the perspective of the security management gateway. It provides sensor node data, timestamp, and proof of origin of any given embedded node, verifies current and past levels of trust of those embedded nodes and networks, and the configuration information from each embedded node, and it validates requests for access to protected or confidential data. Here you see the connection from the trusted key storage operation through the embedded systems using the active trust in the data management system. The trusted key storage retrieves the network synchronization status and timestamp from the active trust monitoring, uses that to set up a trusted session with each node that it needs to communicate with, and then it receives the archived data from the data management system with the signature that can be used in the business system operations. Now we connect that to the top end of that trusted key storage and operations where it connects to the business systems. We still left the data management system on the bottom, but we've got rid of the others that are only specific to operation of the synchronization of the network, or the embedded system network. But now this trusted key storage provides operational support for each one of the enterprise applications, as well as links into user and access management to verify users and authenticate users and authorizes them to access data. We also have this link where now this brokers information to provide privacy data verified to third parties, and that way we can have kind of like a library check-in, check-out to both the business applications to third parties, and identify the users that have utilized or requested and been granted access to these data items. Now this integrates identity and access management for business and user authentication and authorization. The sensor data brokered by the trusted key storage, data is stored by that data management system, and authenticated access for business systems and third-party vendors then who need and request this data makes kind of like a library checkout feature for uniquely identifying and controlling those transactions to what systems, to what organizations, and what users requested and had access and then therefore have accountability to them. So, this offers the ability to have data privacy controls placed on the data by a secure hardware platform. Future courses will talk about the convergence of these security management areas by identifying and having a course to outline each security management area in depth and give an understanding of how they fit into the security management framework overall. All these security management areas will be addressed in future following courses. This section I'm going to give you an overview of what each course has in store and what you can expect to see in the rest of the courses. Security management framework converges each security management area across the business environment by linking each step of the 4 trust accountability chains we talked about earlier. This outlines the upstream and downstream trust link of each step in the trust accountability chain to maintain 100% trust and accountability. First of all, in the sensor data, through the life cycle of data, from production through its transportation, maintaining privacy and integrity through all the storage and transition or marshaling activities of the data, and then how it's utilized and the analytics of the data, and then the audit and verification process all the way through to the destruction, the end of the data lifecycle. How do we chain and manage this particular trust accountability chain of sensor data? The next accountability chain is a product lifecycle, starting from research and development through manufacturing, through the supply chain, and then through operations and the governance, through the end of life and destruction, and how each step the accountability is maintained, and the trust accountability chain of these products all fits together and interfaces with the data, mostly in the operation, but even in the earlier stages, the data trust accountability chain interfaces with the product lifecycle chain. The fourth trust accountability chain is onboard system integrity, and that's in each node in each system out there that's on the network. It's automated sequences from the boot sequence through the software or code utilization, the secret and the key verification, the physical protection of that system, and then the firmware and configuration integrity and updates, and then transfer buses protection on the device. All these as well interfacing with the product lifecycle at every phase of the product lifecycle trust accountability chain. Then we move on to those systems network together and maintaining the fourth trust accountability chain, which is systems communicating together between organizations, authentication of the systems, the system-to-system verification, and the secret rotation and synchronization and the renewal of the security posture, and how to maintain the trust and accountability across all four of these chains will be the feature of all these different security management areas. In the follow-on course, Supply Chain Management for Critical Infrastructure, we're going to look at the ecosystem for provenance and supply, as we talked about earlier. We're going to look mostly at the products and organization network collection types and how they cascade across the supply chain, the ecosystem for provenance. Looking at the hardware, software, the logistics, the logical, and the physical support, and how we cascade the trust of the product lines into pools in each organization, and the pools of products across the ecosystem for critical infrastructure, and how those handoffs between each of those pools are maintained and monitored. And then integrating with that onboard system integrity and the network system trust accountability chains. So integrating everything as it goes through the provenance and the production of these devices and shipment till they reach their end network integration. For supply chain management, we'll focus a lot on the cascading trust in the product lifecycle. And you see in this image, we have divided into those four areas: the manufacturing, which has to design in a transport type of programming, secrets, and base root operation functionality of the device. And in the supply, the individual vendors will then be able to program unique ID and information about the vendor for that level of trust. And then carried on to the installation, be able to program it then based on the vendor trust to program and work on the network system trust accountability chain. And then that enables during operation to work as the network devices and have operational management and synchronization of those secrets. So there's provision secrets at every stage of this product lifecycle. And you transfer accountability for the integrity of each product by cascading it from one organization to the next across the supply chain, and then as it progresses through the supply, connecting it to the network systems. Each organization then maintains a transaction signature each time the device is transferred to that next organization. So then each level provisions the next tier of secrets by linking to the trust chain of that lower level. And accountability is maintained for the parties responsible at all activities, at each stage and each level in the product lifecycle. Security posture then provides a method to fall back to the last trusted state and last trusted level in the case of compromise at any level in this ecosystem. And the provenance trust chains that onboard, links to that chaining of the trust onboard each embedded system. The chain trust extends from that secrets cascaded through the product lifecycle into provenance. The onboard verification of internal health of the system then can be verified. That bootloader verifies all code running before it's executed. And a network active trust verifies that the system, all the self-checks that are provided by the system to the network prior to allowing it to operate as part of the network. And an active management maintains the trust profile or whitelist of each node out there and the overall network status, so they can then link to the data lifecycle management and the enterprise systems and the management of data across the enterprise systems. In the follow-on course, Trust Management for Critical Infrastructure, we'll look at the network ecosystem for embedded systems and the critical infrastructure, how active trust management organizes in groups and works together, and how chaining trust across the network to provide for active management of the trust risk condition for each node on the network as a whole. The network would build from that trust cascaded through the supply chain during provenance, and then the onboard trust as the system verified on startup. And then data accountability builds from that trust of the network and trust of the device, so that at any time when the data is produced, the trust of the network at that time is known, be able to include it with the data produced by the nodes on the network. In the follow-on course for secrets management for critical infrastructure, we'll look at the interconnection of devices and how they are able to work together as a single system, and how that interrelation is done and managed is a big part. So each device requires a root operation and management capability to allow the network to operate as a single system. That way, anywhere they're plugged in, you know how they're going to operate. Making a base part of each node the same for every node provides kind of that Lego block type of approach, where no matter what the size and the use of the system, they all plug together by the interlocking capability of each block being the same, each piece being the same, and each device having those same capabilities that link to upstream and downstream devices. This base operation of the nodes has two portions, really. The minimum root secrets or DNA required to connect all the nodes together and make sure that they can operate the same, so that they can be synchronized by the active trust management on the network and across the network. And then operational restriction for access to those root secrets, so they can only be accessed in accordance with the management and agent needs, so that they can't be used or exploited outside of their required access. This secrets management framework combines the security basis for both the IT and industrial control systems, supporting both synchronous and asynchronous operations. For the synchronous needs and operations of synchronous networks, each node can produce temporary or session keys. The nodes can then use this single session key for sessions up to the enterprise trusted key management, or to encrypt personally identifying information or data reads from that particular node and send them up to the enterprise systems and the enterprise networks through the security management gateway. This synchronous operation also allows for any node to be authenticated uniquely on the network. So this provides for that operation for disconnected networks while maintaining the security posture. If this network would ever not be connected to the enterprise network, each node can then create a message authentication code, which can be verified by any other node on the network to allow it to continuous operation for that availability needs for the critical infrastructure networks. Each node then can also produce the same key anywhere in the network for shared temporary use keys. These keys can be used to encrypt communications on the fly or to verify communications and communication integrity in real time. Also for rotating and synchronizing across the network to refresh and renew the security posture. With key rolling techniques, you can synchronize rapidly to support embedded system needs for control system networks. This allows those closely timed critical infrastructure networks to change keys and rotate and change security posture more often as required for operation. And the key management structure also supports asynchronous operations where time sensitivity is not as much of an issue. Certificates and asymmetric communications can be provisioned when users add them to the network as a way of network node asynchronous authentication. Nodes can exchange public keys as needed and create sessions dynamically as needed for network communications. Reprovisioning, when compromise occurs, or for certificate update management, then can be done using a certificate authority or certificate servers. This allows for cross-certification and enables trust between multiple networks and multiple organizations, even companies and different organizations outside, so where utility companies have to interconnect and talk to each other for different rate usage or for roving loads such as electric vehicles. The course on data lifecycle management for critical infrastructure looks at each node containing that root DNA as secret, and a network synchronizes those keys that allow for data transfer. So now we have the ability to also stamp the data that comes from that node with a proof of the data's origin. Data can be encoded with that unique identification of the origin of the embedded system that produced it, and it can maintain with that data throughout its lifecycle. This individualized node communication session provides individualized privacy and transport verification capability as well. By maintaining individualized data proofs allows for business systems now the operation and have operation based on individualized data lifecycle management. So be able to keep positive track and control over that data as it moves throughout the data lifecycle from production all the way to destruction. The sensor trust accountability chain looks at managing the lifecycle of data in three areas: embedded system networks on the IT networks, and then into the business system operations. First of all, you see down here at the bottom on the right, the synchronization management works with the embedded system network and organizes and synchronizes that highly accountable network. Then it tracks the trust state of the network, and it collects data. On the left, you see the data collection, reading the data from those nodes. As that moves on, you see we've added the trust management piece, and that determines the node risk, reads the synchronization management, and collects other inputs and determines the risk on those nodes out there, and then labels data with that risk condition. On the IT side, it tracks the current and past trust risk conditions. And then on the business system side, it manages data reliability and accountability. Now we add the trusted key storage and management operations. On the embedded system side, they determine trusted paths across the embedded system network, and it communicates securely with any node on the embedded system network. On the IT system side, it provides data with timestamp, data proofs, and risk level. We add in the business enterprise systems and the user identity management. And for IT systems, this validates the system request, and it marshals the data, transfers the data back and forth. On the business system side, it authenticates users and a user request for data, and it uniquely stamps transactions on the data, using it kind of like a library check-in, check-out. And it also controls third-party data management and access to third parties to data and user and accountability of that data. And support for auditing so we can know what happens on these trends in the past. Where do we go next? We're going to look at recommend taking any of these follow-on courses, really in any order. Trust management for critical infrastructure, data lifecycle management for critical infrastructure, secrets management for critical infrastructure, and supply chain management for critical infrastructure. Additional courses and series will build on these four. If these seemed a bit advanced, I might recommend looking back at the Career Guidance series, which basically brings people up to speed from an understanding of what security operations are being done and how businesses use security. We've reached the end of the course. I look forward to seeing you on the next course. Please remember to connect with me on LinkedIn, Christopher Gorog, and also visit my blog, christophergorog.com, for updates on future products and just staying current with the market. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.